Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The sound of shattering crystal cut through the murmuring crowd like a guillotine blade, silencing the ballroom instantly. Champagne dripped from Julian's eyelashes, stinging his eyes, sliding down the sharp curve of his cheekbone to ruin the pristine white silk of his engagement suit. He didn't blink. He didn't gasp. He stood amidst the shards of the flute that had been thrown in his face, looking at the man he had spent the last 3 years building a life with. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel, filled with the city's elite, alphas in their dark velvet, omegas in their shimmering silks, and the invisible betas serving them, held its collective breath. "Look at you," Lucas sneered, his voice slurring slightly with expensive scotch and unearned arrogance. The alpha pheromones rolling off him were sour, like rotting citrus. He gestured to the crowd, his arms sweeping wide, standing there like a statue. Cold. Unresponsive. "I need heat, Julian. I need fire. And you." Lucas laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "You're just a male beta. You're biologically incapable of satisfying a man of my stature. You can't handle an alpha." Julian slowly reached into his breast pocket. The crowd flinched, expecting a weapon. Instead, he produced a handkerchief of slate-gray silk and methodically wiped the alcohol from his face. His expression was not one of heartbreak, nor shame. It was a look of profound, terrifying boredom. "Are you quite finished, Lucas?" Julian asked, his voice an even, melodic baritone that carried without shouting. "I'm finished with you," Lucas spat, turning to wrap an arm around the waist of a petite, trembling omega standing beside him. A boy from a minor house, smelling of cloying vanilla. "I'm terminating the engagement. Tonight. Go back to your spreadsheets and your empty apartment. You don't belong in our world." The humiliation was designed to destroy him. In a society governed by the biological caste system, a beta discarded by a prime alpha was social suicide. It meant Julian was defective. It meant he was trash. Julian folded the handkerchief and placed it on a passing waiter's tray. He adjusted his cuffs, the diamond cufflinks catching the light. Cufflinks he had bought himself, because Lucas had forgotten his birthday. "Very well," Julian said. He didn't beg. He didn't scream. He simply turned his back on the heir to the Thorn shipping empire and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for him, not out of respect, but out of the sheer discomfort of witnessing a public execution. As he pushed through the heavy mahogany doors and stepped out into the cool, rain-slicked night of the city, Julian finally allowed his mask to crack. A small, bitter smile touched his lips. Lucas thought he had broken him. Lucas had no idea that he had just set him free. The rain in Neo Viridio was always acidic, smelling of ozone and neon. Julian stood under the overhang of the hotel entrance, waiting for his rideshare app to load on his datapad. He shivered, the dampness of the champagne seeping through his shirt. A sleek, obsidian vehicle pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a taxi. It was a Phantom, a hyper-luxury sedan with tinted windows and armored plating, the kind of car that didn't just transport people, it transported power. The back window rolled down 3 inches. "Get in." The voice was low, vibrating in Julian's chest like the bass string of a cello. It wasn't a request. Julian hesitated. He knew that voice. Everyone in the underworld, and the upper world, knew that voice. He stepped closer, peering into the gloom of the car's interior. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't walk away, Lord Draven," Julian replied, his tone cautious but unafraid. "Because you're wet, you're single, and I'm the only man in this city who hates Lucas Thorn more than you do right now," the voice replied. The lock clicked open. Julian considered his options. He could go home to his lonely apartment and wait for the eviction notice Lucas would inevitably send, or he could step into the lion's den. Julian Vane had never been one to choose the safe path. He opened the door and slid into the leather interior. The car smelled of expensive leather, rain, and something else, something dark, woody, and intensely potent. Cedar and crushed spices. It was the scent of a prime alpha, but concentrated, heavy enough to make the air feel thick. Cassius Draven sat in the shadows. The head of the Draven Syndicate, the rival to the Thorn family, and a man rumored to be more monster than human. He was massive, his shoulders broad enough to block out the streetlights passing by. His eyes, dark as polished onyx, tracked Julian's every movement. "You took that well," Cassius said, swirling a glass of amber liquid. He didn't offer Julian one. "I don't waste energy on things I cannot change," Julian said, settling back. "Lucas is a child. I was tired of babysitting." "A beta babysitting a prime alpha," Cassius mused. "A biological paradox." "Biology is a suggestion, not a rule," Julian countered. Cassius leaned forward, his face coming into the light. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, predatory features and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. But he looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, and a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the car's climate control. "You're lying, Julian," Cassius murmured. "You aren't just a beta. I've watched you for years. I've watched you run Thorne's business from the shadows while he took the credit. I've watched you negotiate deals that saved his family from bankruptcy. You have a mind that cuts like a diamond. Flattery will get you nowhere, Lord Draven. What do you want?" "I want to make a deal." Cassius set the glass down. "Lucas humiliated you. He cast you aside because he thinks you're weak. He thinks you lack the instinct to handle a powerful partner. And I need a spouse." Julian blinked, the first sign of genuine shock he'd shown all night. "Excuse me. My grandfather's trust," Cassius explained, his voice tightening with pain. "It unlocks on my 35th birthday, provided I am mated. That is in 3 weeks. If I am not, the board votes to dissolve the syndicate. I lose everything. My enemies, including the Thorns, will pick the carcass clean. You could have any Omega in the city," Julian said. "They throw themselves at your feet. I can't stand Omega, their scent. It makes me sick. It's too sweet. Too cloying. It triggers my aggression, not my protection." He exhaled a ragged sound. "I suffer from pheromone hypersensitivity, a rare genetic defect. Being around a heightened Omega or Alpha in a confined space puts me in a state of constant feral agitation. It's why I live in isolation." Julian stared at him. The most feared man in the city was allergic to his own biology. "But you," Cassius continued, his gaze pinning Julian to the seat. "You're a beta. You have no scent. You're a void in the sensory overload of my life. You are quiet. Cool. When you entered the car, my headache receded. So you want to use me as a dampener," Julian surmised, his mind racing. "I want to use you as a shield," Cassius corrected. "Marry me. A contract marriage. 1 year. In exchange, I give you half my assets, unlimited resources, and the platform to destroy Lucas Thorne. I will give you the power to make him regret the day he learned to speak your name." Julian looked out the window. The rain blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and blood. He thought of Lucas's laugh. He thought of the 3 years he had wasted fixing Lucas's mistakes, only to be discarded like a broken toy. He looked back at Cassius Draven. The man was dangerous. He was a loaded gun with a hair trigger. But in his eyes, Julian saw a reflection of his own isolation. "One condition," Julian said softly. "Name it. I am not a trophy. I will not be paraded around and silenced. If we do this, I am your equal. In public and in private." Cassius's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Do we have an accord, Mr. Vane?" Julian extended his hand. "Drive." The Draven estate was less a house and more a fortress of glass and steel perched on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. It was cold, minimalist, and silent. The first week was a study in tension. They lived in separate wings. They met only for meals, which were eaten in silence at a table long enough to land a helicopter on. Julian, however, was not idle. He used the resources Cassius provided to quietly begin acquiring stock in Thorne Shipping. He utilized shell companies and offshore accounts, weaving a web that Lucas, in his arrogance, would never notice until it was too late. But the real challenge was Cassius. The man was a storm contained in skin. Julian often found him pacing the library at night, growling low in his throat, his pheromones so thick they made the air taste like burnt cedar. The hypersensitivity was getting worse as the rut season approached. Standard suppressants didn't work on a prime of his level. One evening, 2 weeks into their arrangement, Julian found Cassius collapsed in the hallway. The alpha was clutching his head, his breathing ragged, claws digging into the expensive carpet. "Cassius," Julian said, rushing to his side. "Get back," Cassius roared, his voice distorted. "Get away. I might hurt you. Julian didn't retreat. He had seen alphas lose control before. Lucas used to throw tantrums when he didn't get his way. But this was different. This was pure, physiological agony. You won't hurt me, Julian said calmly. He dropped to his knees. I can smell everything. Cassius gasped, squeezing his eyes shut. The servants. The gardener 3 floors down. It's like needles in my brain. Focus on me, Julian commanded. He reached out and placed his hands on either side of Cassius's face. His palms were cool. I am a beta. I am nothing. I am the silence. Cassius froze. The touch was shocking. No one touched him when he was like this. They were too afraid of being torn apart. But Julian's hands were steady. And true to his biology, Julian had no scent. He was a blank space in the cacophony of smells assaulting Cassius's senses. Cassius leaned into the touch, a low whine escaping his throat. He opened his eyes. The red was fading, replaced by the deep, soulful black. How are you doing that? Cassius whispered. I'm not doing anything, Julian replied softly, his thumb brushing over the scar on Cassius's brow. I'm just here. For a moment, the power dynamic shifted. The massive, lethal alpha slumped against the slender beta, seeking an anchor. Julian held the weight of him, realizing for the first time that the monster of Viridia was just a man in pain. Lucas was a fool, Cassius murmured, his eyes fluttering shut as exhaustion took him. He said you couldn't handle an alpha. He was wrong. You're the only one who can. Julian felt a strange warmth bloom in his chest, dangerous and unfamiliar. He helped Cassius to his feet and guided him to the master bedroom. That night, Julian sat in the armchair by the bed until Cassius fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He realized then that this was no longer just about revenge. The month flew by. The dynamic in the house changed. The silence became companionable. They started working in the same office. Cassius began to trust Julian's strategic mind, asking for his input on syndicate matters. Julian found himself admiring Cassius's raw honesty. He was brutal, yes, but he never lied. Unlike Lucas, who smiled while he stabbed you, Cassius would show you the knife. But the real test was the Winter Solstice Gala. It was the social event of the year, hosted, inevitably, by the Thorne family. It was where Lucas planned to announce his new engagement to the vanilla-scented Omega. When the black limousine pulled up to the red carpet, the paparazzi went into a frenzy. Cassius stepped out first, looking devastating in a tuxedo of midnight blue velvet. He turned and extended a hand. Julian took it. He stepped out, not in the invisible gray he used to wear, but in a suit of sharp, tailored white with gold embroidery, the colors of House Draven. He looked regal, untouchable. The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Julian Vane, the discarded beta, on the arm of the devil himself. They walked the carpet, Cassius's hand possessively on the small of Julian's back. They moved as one unit, perfectly synchronized. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Lucas Thorne was holding court near the champagne fountain, looking smug. When he saw them, his smile faltered. He excused himself and marched over, his face flushing red. What is this? Lucas demanded, ignoring Cassius and glaring at Julian. You crash my party? With him. We were invited, Julian said smoothly, holding up a platinum invitation. As heads of the Draven Corporation. You're working for him? Lucas scoffed. A secretary? That's all you're good for. He is my fiancé, Cassius interrupted, his voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. And you will speak to him with respect, Thorne, or I will remove your tongue. Lucas laughed nervously, looking around for support. Fiancé? You're marrying a beta? Oh, Cassius, how the mighty have fallen. He's frigid. He's barren. He is. Cassius stepped closer, towering over Lucas, the most brilliant man I have ever met. And he has done more for my empire in 3 weeks than you have done for yours in a lifetime. Lucas snarled, his alpha pride stinging. He decided to use the one weapon he had. He released a wave of aggressive pheromones, a crushing weight meant to force a beta to their knees in submission. It was a command. Kneel. The people around them stumbled back, choking on the hostility. Julian didn't move. He didn't flinch. He simply sipped his water, looking at Lucas over the rim of the glass with that same expression of profound boredom. Your pheromones are unbalanced, Lucas, Julian observed clinically. Too much cortisol. You're stressed. Is it the plummeting stock prices? Or the fact that the board of directors is calling for a vote of no confidence tomorrow morning? Lucas froze. What? I own 51% of your voting shares as of this afternoon, Julian said casually. I bought them through shell companies. The Draven Syndicate is now the majority stakeholder of Thorn Shipping. Lucas turned pale. No, that's impossible. You're just a beta. I am a beta, Julian agreed, stepping forward, invading Lucas's space. And I just ate you alive. Cassius threw his head back and laughed, a rich, genuine sound that shocked the room. He wrapped an arm around Julian's waist and pulled him flush against his chest. I think we're done here, my love, Cassius said, pressing a kiss to Julian's temple, right in front of the cameras. The smell of desperation is ruining my appetite. They turned and walked away, leaving Lucas Thorn standing in the ruins of his life, surrounded by a crowd that was already whispering about the new king and queen of the city. The drive home was silent, but the air was charged with adrenaline. When they entered the foyer of the estate, the facade dropped. Cassius didn't wait. He pinned Julian against the heavy oak door, his hands gripping Julian's waist with bruising force. The intensity of the night, the victory, the sheer competence Julian had displayed, it had snapped the last of Cassius's restraint. You were magnificent, Cassius growled, burying his face in Julian's neck. I told you. Julian breathless, his hands tangling in Cassius's dark hair. I handle things. Handle me, Cassius challenged, lifting his head. His eyes were blown wide, dark with desire and a raw, naked vulnerability. I don't want a beta. I don't want an omega. I want you. There is no contract anymore, Cassius, Julian whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. If we do this, it's real. I tore up the contract the day I found you on the floor with me, Cassius confessed. You're my anchor, Julian. You're the only thing that makes the world quiet enough for me to breathe. Julian smiled, a true, brilliant smile that reached his eyes. Then come here, Alpha. Let me show you what a beta can really do. He pulled Cassius down for a kiss that tasted of rain, victory, and a future that belonged entirely to them. And that is how the calm silenced the storm. If you enjoyed seeing Julian bring an empire to its knees without shedding a drop of blood, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have taken the high road, or would you have ruined Lucas even worse than Julian did? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.